Hi, everybody. Nice
Hi.
crowd. Thanks for joining. Well, in September, we went to the tropical islands of Trinidad and Tobago. And tonight, we're going to move on up to the opposite sort of ends of the continent area, up to Newfoundland. And Jared Clarke is going to tell us about Newfoundland and how and about birding there. So Jared grew up on the northeast coast of Newfoundland and was introduced to the outdoors at a very young age, mostly by his grandfathers. Always a nature enthusiast, he became interested in birds while working for a local conservation group. Jared soon became one of the most avid birders in the province. Despite his official training as a health researcher, he holds a PhD in medicine. His love of nature and sharing it with others increasingly led him astray. He currently runs a small bird and nature tour business called Bird the Rock and routinely leads trips at home and abroad for various tour companies. You can follow his adventures at www.birdtherock.com. Please give a warm welcome to Jared Clarke. Take it away, Jared.
All right. Well, thank you, folks, for inviting me to chat with you guys today. I'm just switching to my screen. I hope you guys can see my screen there now.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Great. All right. Well, again, thank you guys for inviting me. I know I was originally scheduled to join you guys last month, and I had to pull out last minute due to a work commitment. But I was so happy that that Jeannie was able to reschedule me for today, and so here I am. And yeah, I am happy. I'm always excited to talk about birds and birding, and I'm especially always excited to talk about doing that right here in my home of Newfoundland and Labrador. Just a second. Yeah, so just a little bit about me. Jeannie already sort of told you almost everything you need to know about me. I am a Newfoundlander born and raised. I grew up in central Newfoundland, and I've been living here pretty much my entire life. I did spend 1 year during graduate school living and birding in northern Finland, which was absolutely fantastic. Otherwise, I've misspent much of my life exploring the wilds right here at home in Newfoundland and Labrador. I have a completely different academic background. I have a PhD in medicine, but it was my love of birds and birding and my eventual dipping my toes into the waters of leading tours that led me astray from that. And now, instead of working in a lab, I get to work in the wonderful outdoors. And yeah, so I run a small tour business called Bird the Rock here in Newfoundland and Labrador. So I year round, I'm leading birding and nature tours across mostly Newfoundland, very occasionally up into Labrador. And that's just fantastic. And when things are a little bit slower here, I'm also very lucky to be able to work with some tour companies to lead tours elsewhere. I live right now in St. John's with my wonderful family. And yeah, and I absolutely love it. And I hope that through what I get to tell you guys today, that some of you guys will get to experience it, even if it's just vicariously through me. So when I'm not here in Newfoundland and Labrador, I get a chance to lead tours across other parts of Canada and in fact all over the world. So I was excited actually to hear that you guys just a couple of months ago heard all about Trinidad and Tobago. And that is one of my favorite places on earth. I've been fortunate for the last 6 years or so to be leading an annual tour to Trinidad and Tobago. And I am absolutely heartbroken about the closure of Asa Wright. It is an absolutely magical place. And I'm hoping that by next year, I'll be able to make my way back to Trinidad. But I have led tours for Eagle Eye Tours, which is a Canadian company that travels worldwide to Trinidad and Tobago, Honduras, Belize, Guatemala, Hawaii, and I also lead in various places across Canada. I do the migration tour in Pelee. I do an annual tour in New Brunswick as well. So, like everybody, travel is traveling to go birding in other places is one of the perks of my job, and I enjoy it very, very much. All right, so a little bit about Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm sure most of you folks are at least somewhat familiar with where we are. We are the easternmost province in all of Canada. Newfoundland and Labrador being the official provincial name because we comprise of sort of two major areas. We have the island portion, which is Newfoundland, and then the mainland portion, which is actually much larger, Labrador. It's quite a large, we're actually quite a large province. Newfoundland itself, the island, is 109,000 square kilometers or 42,000 square miles. So it's quite large. And again, Labrador is even larger than that. And I've just highlighted here on this map some of the places that you'll hear me mention throughout the talk. But I'm not going to stay here for too long. A lot of people always ask me about getting here. It's a changing situation, of course, now post-COVID, as travel is coming back and flights are getting more regular. But there are two basic ways to get here. One is obviously by air. There are 4 commercial airports that have regular flights to and from larger hubs such as Toronto, Halifax, and as international travel comes back, Newark, London. So we have tons of flights coming into St. John's here, which is our capital city in the far eastern part of Newfoundland, but also Gander, Deer Lake, and up in Labrador, Happy Valley, Goose Bay. So these are commercial airports that you can fly into from larger hubs. There are a few smaller airports that are used mostly for interprovincial travel. But if you're driving, you can also get here via ferry. There's a year-round ferry that leaves Nova Scotia and lands in the southwest corner of the province at Port aux Basques. There's also a summer ferry that runs just during sort of peak tourism season that leaves the same place in Nova Scotia, but lands much closer to St. John's in the eastern part of the island over here at Argentia. And there's also a ferry link between Newfoundland and Labrador up here on the northern peninsula. So those are the major ways of coming and going here on the island. All right, but you didn't come here to hear about that. You come here to hear about some of the birds and the birding opportunities that are here in Newfoundland and Labrador. Our location, where we are, makes us a really unique place. We're in Canada's most northeastern sort of corner, which means that we have a real great mix of northern birds with birds that migrate from further south. Because we're an island and sort of jutting out into the middle of the Atlantic, we have lots of great seabirds. So we have a unique mix of birds that you're not going to find anywhere else in the world, really, and especially in North America. And it's also been getting more and more popular with visiting birders. We've known about it for a long time, that it's an amazing place to go birding, but it's become a real destination of sorts for birding tourism. Most of our visitors come from other parts of Canada and the United States. Occasionally we get people from other parts of the world. And it's our array of habitats, the diverse bird life and other wildlife, and in a lot of cases, some really tough to see species that really add to the allure of coming to Newfoundland and Labrador for most birders. So what I'm going to do during this talk is talk mostly about sort of the spring and summer season, because that's when, from a tourism point of view, that's when most folks would tend to be coming here. So we're going to talk a lot about the kinds of birds you can expect to see during the spring and summer. At the end, I will touch a little bit on winter, which is sort of staring me down right now as the weather is turning colder. And it is actually one of my favorite times to go birding here. So you can't talk about Newfoundland and Labrador without talking about seabirds. I think whether you're from here or you're a birder from away, if you think about Newfoundland and Labrador, you think about the seabirds. It's what we're really well known for. We are home to some of the world's most spectacular and certainly some of the most accessible seabird colonies. Lots of amazing seabird colonies that can be seen from land or very, very short boat trips. And the diversity of the seabirds that breed in some of those colonies is quite staggering. And on some days, you can see more than a dozen of some of the most sought after seabird species in the world. And you can see those in the span of just a couple of hours. So the diversity of seabirds, the richness of those colonies is quite staggering. As you can see here just some of the diversity of birds that you can expect to see on a typical afternoon or morning of seabirding, not too far from my own home right here in St. John's, actually. As some of you may know, the Atlantic puffin is our provincial bird, and for good reason. We are home to some of the largest Atlantic puffin colonies, not just in North America, but some of the largest in the world as well. And in fact, North America's largest Atlantic puffin colony is located in the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve. And that's just 30 minutes from downtown St. John's. So you can leave your hotel in downtown St. John's, and 30 minutes later, you're staring tens of thousands of puffins in the face. It's pretty amazing. And we're so lucky to have it right on our doorstep here. So the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve is a series of 4 islands that are all protected because of the rich seabird colonies that are on them. And they're very close to land. So it's actually only about a 15 or 20 minutes by boat to get out to some of these islands. So unlike some places like Maine, for example, where I know a lot of folks from the United States like to go to see their puffins, and you have quite a long, arduous boat trip to get out to see them, we can do it very leisurely. We can leave the dock, and 2 hours later, you can be back standing on the dock again after having seen an incredible numbers of puffins and other seabirds. So it really is very, very accessible, as well as a completely spectacular seabird colony. So these are just some pictures that I've taken over the years from some of the boat trips that we take. There are 4, if not 5, commercial boat tours that you can take out to this island. So it's not hard to arrange at all. During the peak summer season, those boats are leaving multiple times per day to go out and visit all of these incredible seabirds. And again, it's just 30 minutes from downtown St. John's. There are 250,000 breeding pairs of Atlantic puffins in this reserve. So 500,000 puffins breed on these 4 islands in the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve. And as I said, it's the largest colony in North America and the second largest colony in the world. And if you're worried about getting seasick, if you're prone to getting seasick, or you're stuck on photography and you'd rather be able to do it from a stationary location, we've got you covered. There are a number of places that you can see Atlantic puffins from the comfort of shore without ever having to set foot on a boat. Bonavista and Elliston up here, about 3 hours from St. John's, here on the northeast coast, is one of the most popular places where you can, a 5-minute hike from your car, you can sit down and have access to a nice sized colony of several thousand Atlantic puffins. And a lot of those amazing, beautiful up close pictures of puffins that you see on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, a lot of those are actually taken right here in Elliston. So it's another really lovely place to go hang out. And these are my 2 daughters right here a few years ago, enjoying the puffins in Elliston. But if puffins aren't enough for you, I can give you 4 million other reasons to go visit the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve. Because puffins, even though there are 500,000 of them, they're actually a minority in that seabird colony. Those 4 islands are home to 4.5 million breeding seabirds from May to August of every year. And it is absolutely spectacular. It's something out of a National Geographic film to hop on a boat and go out to those islands, and the sky will turn dark with seabirds at times. It is absolutely mind-boggling to see the density of birds. And again, more than 3/4 of those birds are not puffins. They're other species. Some of the most common species you can expect to see in the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve are the common murres, like you see up here in the top left, as well as some of the southernmost breeding thick-billed murres in the world, breeding right there in those colonies, and razorbill as well. Lots and lots of razorbill breeding in the colony. So it's absolutely amazing to see these beautiful black and white birds so close together, and a great opportunity to sort of be able to compare and contrast them and start getting the hang of some of your seabird identification. Also breeding in the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve among those 4 million birds are lots and lots of black-legged kittiwakes, a small number of northern fulmar. It's some of the only breeding northern fulmars in North America actually are breeding there in that colony. And another bird that we often don't get a chance to see because they're nocturnal, but there are about 1 million Leach's storm petrels breeding in the colony as well. Very rarely do we get to see them on the boat tours because they come and go under the cover of darkness. But very, very occasionally, we're lucky to get to see a few flying around. But there are other opportunities to see leeches, storm petrels as well in Newfoundland and Labrador, and several other gull species such as herring, and of course these beautiful great blackback gulls breeding in the reserve itself. And if the birds aren't enough, I can maybe even give you a few more reasons to come and visit and go see the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve with me. If you come at the right time of year and a good year, it's a great way to see icebergs. There are often icebergs that drift down, and you can see them right from the boat, if not from land. And during the middle of the summer, in July month, one of the largest congregations of humpback whales in the world gathers right there, feeding on the rich sea life of the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve. So you can hop on one boat, and within 2 hours, some years you can see tons and tons of whales, maybe dolphins, as well as all these 4.5 million seabirds. So it is quite a spectacular place, and is definitely should be at the top of your must-see list if you ever get a chance to come to Newfoundland. So one of the seabirds that we haven't mentioned yet are northern gannets, and they are often seen at the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve. But if you see them there, they're going to be flying around. They're going to be feeding. They're one of the few seabirds that we have here that do not breed in the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve themselves. Where they do breed is about 2 hours south of St. John's, in a place called Cape St. Mary's Ecological Reserve, which is another absolutely spectacular and fortunately very accessible seabird colony that is home to about 30,000 of these absolutely majestic birds breeding on the cliffs and sea stacks there. So here are just a few pictures that I've taken over the years at Cape St. Mary's. It's a short hike, just under a mile, a fairly easy hike out from an interpretation center across this absolutely spectacular barren landscape to over here where you're overlooking the gannet colony itself. So all these white things you can see here are gannets breeding on the cliffs, and this big giant sea stack that's right here. Here's a picture of a client of mine a few years ago at the viewpoint overlooking the main colony itself. It's an absolutely beautiful place to really take in the majesty of these birds. And if you're into photography, it is absolute heaven out there. Some incredible opportunities to photograph these really, really beautiful seabirds. And a nice pano view here showing again a couple of my clients overlooking the gannet colony here on the left, and over on the right you can actually see the interpretation center that we walked out from. It looks far in this photo, but it is actually only it's just over 3/4 of a mile walk over these rolling beautiful landscapes. And again, just some views. You can see here, this is a little bit of a different view over the colony itself, and you can see how the majority of the gannets are breeding on what is really a big sea stack. So it's actually separated from the mainland by a big chasm. And the reason that they do that is they're protected there from land predators like foxes and coyotes. So it is a very safe place, which is part of the reason that the gannets, hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago, would have selected this site as one of their very few breeding colonies in North America. And this is the third largest breeding colony of gannets in North America, and it is by far the most accessible one that there is. So it is an absolutely staggering place, and another place that really needs to be at the top of your list of places to see if you ever come visit Newfoundland and Labrador. And just like Witless Bay Ecological Reserve, it's not a one bird show. The gannets sure are the star of it, but there are a number of other seabird species that breed at Cape St. Mary's as well, including again the murres. Here we have common murres, two different forms of common murre on the left and the right. Thick-billed murre. These are the very southernmost breeding thick-billed murres in the world. Are breeding on the cliffs here at Cape St. Mary's. It's a great chance to see razorbills up close and personal. Some really great photo opportunities. Black-legged kittiwake. And it's also a place where you can expect sometimes to see breeding great cormorants on the rocks, as well as double-crested, but the greats are always a little more interesting, especially in the summer months. And it's not just the birds, of course. There are lots of other really amazing, fantastic things about Cape St. Mary's. The area itself is a really unique habitat type called the Eastern Hyperoceanic Barrens. It's very rare in the world, and it's where these upland barrens meet the ocean. And the cooling effect of the ocean actually creates a very small little unique climate zone right along the very edge of the cliffs there. So even though you're at a very relatively low elevation, a lot of alpine and subalpine plants are growing out there. Things like Diapensia, Moss campion that you can see here. So some plants that are pretty rare for this elevation growing there. Also a great place to see some really neat barren growing orchids like the purple fringed orchid over here, tall northern green orchid. So there's some really, really neat plant life and wildflowers growing in the reserve, which are always fun to see. We have short-tailed swallowtail here. This is a butterfly species that's nearly endemic to Newfoundland. It occurs in very few places outside of Newfoundland, and it's about the only place that it's fairly easy to find them, is here on the island. Absolutely beautiful little butterfly that can be seen at Cape St. Mary's. And there are lots of other barren type birds that we're going to talk about later, like these horned larks, that you will be sure to see on your walk out to see the Gannet colony. And it's also one of the places that sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to see some of our woodland caribou. So we have the southernmost woodland caribou in the world here on Newfoundland. And this is one of the places that you can, with a little bit of luck, you can run into one of the herds right here in or around Cape St. Mary's. So not all of our seabirds are birds that breed here. So in the latter part of the summer, we get a few additional species of seabirds that you can expect to see that are not breeding in Newfoundland and Labrador. In fact, some of these species, like these shearwaters that you're seeing here, these are great shearwaters here on the left, sooty shearwater. They're actually they're here in July month, but it's their winter. So they've bred in the southern hemisphere in what is our winter, of course. And after doing that, they've actually migrated north to Newfoundland to feed on the real rich reserves of fish and sea life that we have in our waters during those months. So they show up in late summer to do that in huge numbers. Sometimes you see groups of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of these shearwaters milling on the water and flying around and feeding. Great and sooty shearwater are quite common. We do get some Manx shearwater, and in fact, we do have some Manx shearwater breeding on a couple of locations in southern Newfoundland, and I think they're the only confirmed breeding Manx shearwaters in North America. So you can expect to see some of these really neat seabirds. Some other seabirds that you might expect to see if you're here in the latter part of summer. If you're really, really lucky, you'll get to see great skua, or maybe even South Polar skuas. All three types of yagers we get here later in the summer. As you know, they're kleptoparasites, so they're often seen chasing around the kittiwakes, trying to steal food. This is Pomeranian yager here. This is a long-tailed yager. And we also get, they're not technically seabirds, but we do tend to see them on the sea at this time of year. Red and red-necked phalarope migrating along in the late summer, and we often see flocks of them out on the water as well. So there's a real incredible diversity of seabirds that you can expect to see if you visit Newfoundland and Labrador, really at any point during the summer months. And I always like to share this photo. This is a very classic example of a photo bomb. I was actually trying to take a photograph of the great shearwater that you see flying here, and he sort of got photo bombed by a whale. So I always tell people that Newfoundland is one of those places where the whales actually get in the way of your birding. So maybe that's a good complaint, I guess. So that's the seabirds, and it really is easy to get lost among the seabirds here. The seabirding is so spectacular and so easy and so accessible that it's easy to focus a lot of your time on that. But there are a lot of other birds that you can expect to see when you come here. It's not all about the seabirds. We're a big, diverse province, and there are a lot of places, a lot of different habitats that there are to explore across the island. And each one of those different habitats comes with their own different suite of birds, wildlife, and other natural highlights to enjoy. So if you're coming to Newfoundland, make sure you take lots of time to enjoy those seabirds, but also include lots of time to explore some of these other habitats, because there's so much to see and explore, from forest birds to barren land birds and wetlands. We've got a little bit of it all. And just some examples, you can see boreal chickadee, boreal owl, mourning warbler, willow ptarmigan, often a high target for people who are coming to visit Newfoundland and Labrador. Wilson snipe here, pine grosbeak, which are resident. They're here all summer long, all winter long. Yellow belly flycatcher. This is a black-throated green warbler. Just a few examples of the many types of birds that you can expect to see. All of Newfoundland and Labrador falls within the boreal range. So all of our forests, and we have lots of forests. One of the great things about being such a big island with only 500,000 inhabitants is that we have a lot of green space and a lot of very protected and very untouched forests in lots of ways. So our forests are all boreal. They're very rich, and they have a very decidedly northern flavor to them when you look at the bird life. A lot of northerly breeding species. Again, boreal chickadee, pretty tough to see anywhere, I think, in the United States, and even most of southern Canada. It's a hard bird to see, and here they're extremely common. I can get boreal chickadees in my backyard here. Olive-sided flycatcher, a number of species of warbler breeding. There are probably about 15 to 16 species of warbler that breed across Newfoundland and Labrador, including real goodies like the black-polled warbler is one of the most common breeding birds on the whole province. Magnolia warblers, black-throated green warbler again. So you can expect to encounter a whole diversity of warblers if you go birding in the forests of Newfoundland and Labrador. Lots of really neat finches all year round. Again, the pine grosbeak, but also red crossbill. We have an endemic race, the Perched race of red crossbill. It's considered endemic to Newfoundland, and it's also very threatened, although their numbers seem to be coming back right now. So it's always a really special bird to see. So just some examples of some of the birds and the birding you might expect to find if you were to go into some of our really, really beautiful boreal forests. And some great places if you're exploring Newfoundland and Labrador to go for some of the boreal forest. And they're quite different across the island. So the forests here in the east, where I live right now, in the Avalon Peninsula, are very different in lots of ways than the forests on the west coast in places like Gros Morne and the Codroy Valley. You have more diverse forest and tree types over here. So the bird life is actually, the songbird life is more diverse on the west coast. Whereas on the east coast, the forests are very thickly vegetated with coniferous trees, like you see in this picture here on the left. So the diversity of birds you can expect to see changes as you travel across the island. But yeah, I would, birding here in the Avalon Peninsula, Terra Nova National Park and Gros Morne National Park offer amazing opportunities to get out on some really beautiful trails that take you through the forests with some wonderful birding. Yeah, we also have lots and lots of wetlands. I'm always amazed when I have the opportunity to fly over Newfoundland. Looking down, it's, you'd swear that more than 50% of the landmass is actually water. Tons of ponds and lakes, a lot of them very secluded, very quiet. And we have quite a diversity of waterfowl and water birds that breed in those kinds of wetlands. Things for like northern pintail that you see here, ringneck duck, greater and lesser scaup breeding on the island. American bittern is one of our only herons actually that make it this far north on a regular basis, breeding throughout our bogs. Wilson snipe, sora, common loons are everywhere. I know that's a pretty special bird for most people, and we tend to overlook them a little bit because there are common loons breeding on every little body of water on the island, and we see them year round. So they're on our lakes and ponds all summer long with that incredible haunting call. And then in the winter, they spend the winter in ice-free estuaries and bays, sheltered bays all around the province. And we have some breeding shorebirds as well, including on the southwest coast of Newfoundland, some of the very endangered piping plovers that some of them, the most northerly breeding actually, piping plovers. So there's lots of incredible things you can see by exploring all of our wetlands. And there are lots of opportunities to do that. There are an incredible number of walking trails and boardwalks and provincial and national parks that offer great opportunities to access some absolutely beautiful, pristine waterways, whether that's bogs or ponds or lakes, swamps. Yeah, lots of beautiful wetland birding right across the island. And the other habitat that a lot of people tend to overlook, but it happens to be one of my favorite places to go birding, are the coastal barrens and the subarctic and subalpine tundra. And we have lots of that in Newfoundland Labrador. Newfoundland is actually home to the southernmost subarctic tundra in the world. So we have actual tundra right here in Newfoundland. I can leave my house and 30 minutes from now, I could be standing in the middle of subarctic tundra. And that's something that's pretty special to say. With that, in addition to all of the amazing wildflowers and vegetation that you get to find out on those barren landscapes, are some pretty neat birds as well. Willow Ptarmigan are common breeders in our lowland tundras, and it's always something that people want to look for when they come to visit. They can be tough to spot because they're very camouflaged, but they are if you know where to look, you can often find Willow Ptarmigan. And down here we have a rock ptarmigan, not as easy to find, much more restricted on the island, but they breed sort of at the tops of some of our highest elevation mountain ranges. I know what we call mountains in Newfoundland would be laughed at in most places, but we have the long range mountains which go up the west coast of Newfoundland, and that's actually the very tail end of the Appalachians. So it sort of joins us a little bit. They're some of the oldest part of the Appalachians, very worn down. Elevation is only about 2,800 feet, but up at the top of some of those summits, you're getting rock ptarmigan breeding, and they're an absolutely incredible bird to see. And there aren't too many places in North America outside of Alaska where you can actually find rock ptarmigan. So it's a pretty neat bird to be able to spot if you ever get a chance to come to Newfoundland. Lots of other neat birds breeding out on those kinds of habitats, from American pipits and horned larks, savanna sparrows, super common. And then other birds, some raptors like rough-legged hawk or this short-eared owl. So some really cool birds that breed in this habitat that you can very easily overlook if you're driving through it, if you don't stop to take the time to appreciate just how incredible a place it really is. And again, lots of other neat wildlife out there. Those barrens are one of the best places to look for woodland caribou during the summer months, as they're out there roaming around, feeding on the various lichens that they love so much. Really neat plants. This is alpine azalea, again, another alpine plant that's growing out on these barrens. And these are some friends of mine up here. We hiked up to the top of some of the long range mountains in Grossmore National Park to look for rock ptarmigans here. So there are some really neat places to check out some of these different habitats. Again, St. John's is right over here in the far east. So just south of St. John's is Cape Race and Cape St. Mary's, two beautiful areas of subarctic tundra. The Cape Bonavista area has some small areas of subarctic tundra. And then over here on the west coast, if you get up into the higher elevations, again, of those long range mountains, they come right up this, the spine of it travels from just slightly east of Port aux Basques all the way up to the tip of the Great Northern Peninsula. And there are some incredible opportunities to get up into the more higher up subalpine type tundra to look for some really special birds, as well as again, lots of really neat flowers and plant life up there as well. So there are so many treasures to discover. And I always like to tell people that, one of the great things about birding, one of my favorite things about birding as a hobby, is not even the birds. It's that it's an excuse to get out and you get to enjoy and explore so many other things. And lots of times when I come home at the end of a day of birding, my highlight of the day wasn't even a bird. It was something else I saw along the way. So there are lots of incredible things that you can expect to see if you spend some time exploring nature and doing some birding here in Newfoundland and Labrador, whether it's some of our beautiful wildflowers like these orchids down here, or some of the abundant berries. This is a bake apple, also known as a cloudberry, that grows on the barrens in Newfoundland. Some of the incredible scenery, all the lighthouses we have here, or wildlife like our moose or harp seal that you see here. And these photos up here in the top were taken at the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Mistaken Point, one of Canada's newest UNESCO World Heritage Sites. These are some of the oldest multicellular organism fossils in the world, dating back about 565 million years. And it's some of the earliest evidence of where life went from single-celled to multicellular organisms. So yeah, again, some absolutely incredible things that you can get to see along the way when you're out looking for a few birds on the landscape. So that's sort of the main, the spring and middle of summer. Things start to quiet down. The breeding birds start to get quiet as you get through July. Into August, the seabirds are starting to disappear. But as you know, the wonderful thing about birding is that there's always something to see. And every time that the seasons start to change, it just means something different that we can see. And late summer brings the shorebirds. So although we only have a handful of shorebird species that breed in Newfoundland, so during the summer months from May to the middle of July, you're only going to expect to see 4 or 5 species of shorebirds. But once the end of July comes and you get some of these shorebirds migrating from the Arctic down the Atlantic flyway, they pass right through Newfoundland. And then we get, between 20 and 30 different species of shorebirds that pass through the province during late summer and fall. And that's something that really brings added value to that latter part of the season when a lot of the other birds are sort of starting to get quiet and a little tougher to see and enjoy. And we get a real incredible diversity, things like dunlin, semi-palmated plover, piping plover, pectoral sandpiper here. Whimbrels are always fun to get to see and enjoy, and they're one of the earliest migrants to pass through, starting in late July usually. So there's a real incredible diversity of shorebirds that come through, and that's a really fun time to go birding. So if you do happen to find yourself here in late summer and some of the other birds are kind of tough to see, just take a day to go exploring some of our many beaches and tidal estuaries, and you'll get to enjoy an incredible diversity of shorebirds. Again, this is white rump sandpiper over here, one of the most abundant sort of late summer and early fall migrants that move through. American golden plovers still move through. I think their numbers have been declining all across their range in North America, but we still get pretty good numbers of them migrating through the upland tundra here in Newfoundland. And winter, let me tell you just a little bit about winter. I think winter is our best kept secret. Winter brings with it a whole new suite of birds, many of which are visiting from further north and are really difficult to see in most other parts of North America. So if you're a birder who doesn't mind a little bit of cold, winter birding in Newfoundland and Labrador can be really rewarding. It really is worth a trip. And it's become pretty popular with, these ABA listers, the birders who are looking to build their list of birds for North America, because there are a number of things that are pretty easy to see here that are tough to see pretty much anywhere else in North America. The biggest target for most birders who come here in the winter is this little guy up here, the dovekey. They're pretty tough to see anywhere in North America from land, and yet they're really reliable here in January month. So it's a bird that is always at the top of people's lists when they get here. But other things like purple sandpipers, Bohemian waxwings, Willow Ptarmigan, they're resident birds here, so we can see them summer and winter. And lots of sort of relatively scarce birds like this tufted duck. Tufted duck is a European species that occasionally wanders to North America, so it's a pretty rare bird, and it causes excitement when it's seen pretty much anywhere in North America, except right here in St. John's, where we have a wintering flock of several dozen that come from Iceland every year. They spend their summers breeding in Iceland, and instead of following the traditional route to winter in Ireland, they've somehow gotten used to coming in the opposite direction. They come to and they spend the summer right here in the middle of the city in some of our ponds and lakes, along with a lot of other really diverse um, waterfowl as well. So winter birding here, it's actually pretty easy birding. A lot of it can be done right around the city or close to your car, and it can be really really rewarding with some really good looks at a lot of these birds and some of them better looks than you'd expect to get in the summer months. So again, here's just some example of some of the fun winter birding that you can get to do. Things like boreal owl sometimes get spotted in the winter months when they come out from the deeper forest because of the deep snow. They show up in people's backyards. This was actually taken in someone's front yard, right in front of right on next to their doorstep. I think you can even see their front steps right here in the back of the picture, right in downtown St. John's. Again, this is dovekey. Again, probably the most sought after bird of people coming to visit here in winter. Tufted duck, Canada jay, another resident bird that's here year round. Really, really fun to enjoy in the winter months. Things like black-bellied woodpecker, evening grosbeak. And we get, of course, because of our location, we get some rare birds visiting during the winter that sometimes people come here in the hopes of seeing. Things like this fieldfare from Europe that showed up this past winter. And again, lots of other neat wildlife that you can expect to see if you're here in the winter. We get a number of species of seals that hang out here during the winter months. Our caribou and our moose are always around. So lots of fun things to see during the winter months. So it might not sound appealing sometimes to go north for birding during the winter months, but the payoff could be quite good. All right, so very quickly, I'm just going to give you guys a few tips if you're ever thinking about coming to Newfoundland for planning a trip, because I know I'm going to get asked a lot of these questions. So Newfoundland is a fantastic birding destination at any time of year. And again, I always like to tell people that you don't always have to think about summer. So you need to decide which season speaks to you. What time of year would you like to come here? That's the first sort of decision you need to make. What kind of birds would you like to see? What kind of weather do you want to enjoy? What else is on your sort of menu of things you'd like to see and do? And it's not just the birds. You need to think about things like the icebergs, the whales, history, culture, food, and all the amazing scenery. So what out of all that speaks to you, and that'll sort of help to dictate when you want to plan your trip. So I've got a little bar graph down here that shows sort of some of the main things that people want to see during the summer months to help decide when to come. And I'm always happy to chat to people about choosing the right time for a visit based on what it is that you'd like to see. So some things to think about. Obviously, these days you need to think about travel in the days of COVID. So before planning a trip to Newfoundland, you need to be aware that as a province, Newfoundland and Labrador has its own travel restrictions right now, in addition to the Canadian ones. So if you're planning a visit anytime in the near future, you need to make sure you take some time to take a look at what the travel restrictions are based around COVID and what you need to do. But thankfully, we've been opening up again to travel, and it's getting closer and closer to normal with every passing month. How much time do you want to spend if you're visiting Newfoundland and Labrador? And that's a question I get a lot. And what I find is that Newfoundland and Labrador is a lot bigger than most people expect. And a lot of people think that they can come here for a week and see Newfoundland. And I can tell you that that is not the case. I usually suggest that you want at least 2 weeks if you want to explore the whole island or most of the island. You want at least 2 weeks here. If you have less time than that, if you're just coming for a week or 10 days, I suggest you narrow your visit to one general area. So for example, you do Eastern Newfoundland or you do Western Newfoundland, and don't try to squeeze too much into your trip. Deciding on which area you want to visit, it depends in part on what you'd most like to see. So for example, Eastern Newfoundland here in the St. John's area is the home to most of the major seabird colonies. So if seeing puffins and common murres and northern gannets and those incredible seabird colonies are high on your list, you want to focus your visit in Eastern Newfoundland. Whereas Western Newfoundland has more songbird diversity. It has Grossmore National Park, which is absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. So if that's more important on your list, maybe you want to visit Western Newfoundland and save Eastern Newfoundland for a later visit. So before deciding on that, you really do sort of want to think about what's highest on the list of what you'd like to see. When to visit? Well, again, it's a fantastic destination any time of year. So choosing your dates will depend really on what you're hoping to see. So the seabird colonies are most active from late May to early August. You come any earlier than that, you're going to be too early. If you come after the first week of August, you're going to miss some of the seabird species, because some of the species like the common murres and the razorbills, in those first few days of August, they will start leaving the colony and going out to sea, and you won't see them, at least not easily anymore. So really June and July for the seabird colonies. Of course, the breeding songbirds are most diverse and active in early June to early July. They're here all summer long, but after that first week of July, the babies are all hatching. The birds stop singing. They get really, really quiet. They get secretive because they're taking care of the babies, and it gets a lot harder to spot them. So if you want to get the full diversity of breeding songbirds, and especially if you want to hear all that beautiful singing that fills our forests in the summer months, you want to think about coming in June, or at the latest, the first few days of July. And that being said, if you also want to see whales while you're here, they're most numerous and reliable in July and early August. So you might want to balance your trip and say, well, I want to come at the very end of June or the first few days of July to try and get the whales, but still be at the best time for the birds. If icebergs are important to you, no, they vary a lot from year to year. In fact, this year we had hardly any icebergs, but 2 years ago there was an iceberg in every cove. So it really does vary from year to year, and there's no way to predict how good an iceberg year it's going to be. But in general, when they are around, they're most reliable in May and June. So if icebergs are really important to you, you want to plan your trip a little bit earlier in the season. But maybe things like shorebird migration or wildflowers are important to you. And that again will affect sort of the dates that you choose. So I'm always happy, again, you feel my contact information is at the end of this talk. If you're ever thinking about coming to Newfoundland and you want to pick dates that are best for you, I recommend that you drop me a line, and I'm happy to sort of to help you suss all that out. And again, if you want to come in birding in winter, the winter birding is absolutely fantastic here. And you can see some awful great things with pretty short trip of just, a long weekend or 4 or 5 days. In fact, it's becoming so popular now that I'm already booked solid this year for all of January and half of February with birding tours. Wings is sending 3 birding tours back to back to Newfoundland because they've had so many bookings. So it is becoming more and more popular for birders to visit here during winter. So I keep saying it's our best kept secret, but I guess the secret maybe is out. And the biggest tip that I can give you if you're planning on coming to Newfoundland and Labrador is to plan ahead. This is not a place where you can expect to come, especially during the peak tourism months of June and July and August, and expect to show up at the airport and just be able to rent a car, because there's a good chance there won't be one available. And the hotels can very easily be booked up. So you want to make sure you plan well ahead of time to book your accommodations and any rental vehicles you need, usually months in advance. So for the summer months, winter is a little different because not as many visitors here. But if you're thinking about coming in summer, be sure to plan well ahead when it comes to those things. And of course, besides the birding and all the other, nature and wildlife, there are tons of other things to see and do. Lots of incredible culture and history here to explore, beautiful scenery. We have a really great, music culture here, lots and lots of live music and performances. It's becoming a real destination for foodies. There's some incredible culinary experiences that you can have here. So there's lots and lots to do and see besides the birds, if that's something that you're into, or in lots of cases, if you're traveling as a couple and one of you is a birder and the other one maybe not quite so much, rest assured you can come here and have a very balanced kind of vacation that we have something for everybody. And I find that couples who come here in that kind of a situation always go away feeling that they both had a really great time and seen lots of incredible things. I haven't talked about Labrador very much because I don't get up there very much myself. It's a little less accessible. So I'm only just briefly going to touch on it. It is an absolutely beautiful place. and I would like to explore more of it myself. It's a great place for birding. It's a great place for other kinds of wildlife. Sadly, with Labrador, a lot of it is quite inaccessible, and it's a lot harder to get there. So just a few tips. It is very beautiful and exciting, and it's well worth a visit, but it does require a lot more planning if you're thinking about going to Labrador. Southeastern Labrador, this area down here, Four Toe to Cartwright, for example, is pretty accessible because there is a ferry that crosses over from Newfoundland, and there are roads, highways that in this section of Labrador. So it is possible if you're exploring Newfoundland to sort of just pop over for a couple of days and get to explore a little bit of southeastern Labrador. But going anywhere else really in Labrador requires quite a bit of planning. There is the Trans-Labrador Highway, which opened in recent years, goes as far as Happy Valley Goose Bay right now. But if you want to go to either one of the national parks, Mealy Mountain National Park or Torngat Mountains National Park, they're quite isolated. You really have to fly in and stay at lodges. So all of that requires a lot of special planning. And again, if people are interested in looking further into that, please feel free to drop me a line, and I'm happy to point you to some resources and chat about some of the logistics that you'd need to think about. All right, and because of our location at the very eastern edge of North America, we tend to get here in Newfoundland Labrador a lot of rare but sometimes regular visitors from Europe. A lot of rare species that cross the ocean show up here that don't show up in other places, and it varies. Some birds tend to show up in different seasons, but the rarest are usually found during spring and fall migration, and some of those cause quite a panic in some of these ABA listers that will fly to Newfoundland at the drop of a hat when something like this is a good example, this common redshank, only the third ever seen in North America, showed up a few years ago. And I had calls within 24 hours of people from Texas and California and Michigan who were all planning on coming in on the next flight. So some of these are pretty exciting for North American birders. They're exciting for us too, even though we get to see them a little more regularly. But from a birding tourism point of view, sometimes these are hot tickets, and birders really like to come in to add these rare visitors to their North American birding list. So it's always a lot of fun, and it adds a lot of excitement to the birding scene here. All right, thank you folks for indulging me for the last just about an hour. I don't want to take too much of any more of your time, but I am open for questions. If anybody has any questions, I'll throw it back to Jeannie, and she can sort of moderate if there's any questions coming in the chat box or whatever. Here is my various contact information, my website. If you go to my website, birdtherock.com, there is a contact me page, and you can email me directly through that. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of me, is to go to my website. But I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm always posting pictures of my various adventures and the fun birds and wildlife that I'm getting to see. And if you want to see more stuff about Newfoundland in general on any of your social media feeds, check out this hashtag birdsNL, and you'll see lots of incredible images and photos from a lot of other birders and much better photographers than me. So please do check out any and all of this. All right.
All right. Thank you so much, Jared. Wow. Makes me want to fly in tomorrow, or at least in January. I think winter birding would be really interesting, although tough. I would imagine you have to have a lot of specialized equipment.
You do, but the nice thing about winter birding here, as I sort of alluded to, is that it's you don't have to do any long hikes, or most of the time when we're birding, you can throw a rock and hit the car. So it's you can be outdoors in the elements for short periods of time, get back in the car, have a warm, get a coffee. It's not like quite like birding in sort of isolated Alaska at all.
Great. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah. One person mentioned is June black fly season.
June, not so much. July, a little bit more, but it'll depend on the year. If we get a warmer June, it can be. Here in Newfoundland, mosquitoes tend to be a little worse than the black flies. You go to Labrador and you get a lot of black flies. The key thing to remember is that when you're birding in Newfoundland, for the most part, you're spending most of your time on or near the coast. where there's a little bit of an onshore breeze and all that, and you almost never even notice any flies in those areas. So I would say that, on a 10-day birding tour in Newfoundland, mosquitoes are a little bit bothersome for 1 or 2 of those days at the most. It's not really an issue.
Okay, well, that's excellent to know. Let's see. Chris also asked, I gather that an ecological reserve is open to the public?
For the most part. So the reserves are protected. So for example, the Witless Bay Ecological Reserve, those 4 islands are protected. So you can jump on a boat tour and go explore it, but you can't land on the island. There's no access to the actual island. Cape St. Mary's is an ecological reserve, and that's open. You can go wander anywhere you like on that, but you just can't wander out in amongst the breeding birds. Yeah, so they're all accessible, but there may be some restrictions, obviously to protect the integrity of the breeding birds. Yes, they're open to visitors.
Okay, and are the puffins? Lynn would like to know if the puffins are still struggling to have to dive deeper to get the fish due to warming waters.
So far, it doesn't seem to be too big an issue here. I know that it seems to be affecting the breeding colony in Maine a little bit more. So far, we're not seeing big effects of it here, and our puffins seem to be doing quite well. But I think it's, we are seeing some changes in the distribution of and the timing of some of our migratory fish that these birds rely on. So I'm sure as the climate continues to change, it's going to impact. But as of right now, our birds, thank God, seem to be doing really well.
Great. Steve asked, any sightings of black-browed albatross, ancient murrelets, or red-billed tropic birds?
There's one record of about each of those in Newfoundland waters, a couple black-browed albatross, one ancient murrelet from quite a while ago, and one tropic bird after a hurricane a few years ago. Those tend to be pretty rare, even though they are coming up with warming waters. One thing we are seeing a change in, what's related to this, is we're starting to see, at least on offshore, from offshore vessels, are multiple reports of brown booby every summer. So those birds are definitely following the warming water further north, and it's probably so we're seeing it with brown booby. We've seen a number of magnificent frigate birds in the last few years. So I would be surprised if tropic bird and albatross don't soon follow suit. And I'm always keeping my eyes open.
Cool. Yeah. You had some rare birds up there recently, right?
Yeah, I saw 2 brand new ones for the island just this weekend. We had a long-billed dowitcher and a western tanager that I had never seen in the province before. Pretty rare, both like the 3rd and 4th records for the island.
Cool. That's great. But you said the sea eagle, stellar sea eagle, was not in Newfoundland.
That was in Nova Scotia. Yeah. So
Nova Scotia.
We're hoping it's going to continue east, but it was not too far away.
Great. Any other questions for Jared? I have a question about accommodations. Are they just normal hotels, like everywhere, or are they more rustic in your neck of the woods?
Temporarily, no.
We have a mix of everything, right? So of course, St. John's as a city is about 120,000 people. So we've got everything you'd expect in a modern city. So we have all the beautiful modern hotels, but we also have lots of historic bed and breakfasts, in the downtown area. So in St. John's, we sort of have whatever you would like. If you'd like something a little more rustic and historic, we certainly have it, but we also have the modern hotels with all those creature comforts and stuff as well. So St. John's, you have whatever you want. Once you get outside of St. John's into the more rural areas, if it's a larger community, you might have some inns and hotels, but otherwise there are lots of bed and breakfasts, for the most part, cottages, with where you rent the whole cottage with a couple of bedrooms and a kitchenette and those kinds of things. So those you will find, scattered all around. So there are lots and lots of options, but during the summer months, sometimes it's those things book up pretty quickly. So it is important to plan ahead.
I had a question for the speaker. The name Witless Bay, can you provide the origin of that?
I can, at least to what I know, and you hear lots of funny stories about it. So there are lots of sort of old wives' tales about, funny stories of how it got the name Witless Bay because, somebody was scared witless or somebody wasn't all that intelligent. But what I understand to be the true story is that early on when the community was settled about 350 years ago, there was a family of Wittles, Wittle. So it was Wittles Bay. And at some point during, the transcribing of maps or whatever, it got misspelled from Wittles Bay to Witless Bay. So that's the story that I've heard that seems to be the truth of it. But all the funny wives' tales about it are a lot more interesting.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Patty and Jim ask, is it true that a walrus was seen in Witless Bay a few years ago?
Yeah, so walrus, don't normally occur in Newfoundland anymore. If you were to go back about 1,000 years ago, there were walrus all around the coast of Newfoundland, but now they're restricted to northern Labrador. Very occasionally, one drifts down with the ice, and there was one in Witless Bay, and I was lucky enough to actually get down and spend a full day hanging out with that walrus. So I don't have them accessible, but I have lots of really fun pictures of that walrus that showed up in Witless Bay, and it was being seen from the boat tour. So just another feather in their hat of all the cool critters that they get to see on that boat tour.
Yeah. Steve Melcher mentioned that there's I guess a cool Airbnb on Fogo Island.
Yeah, so he's probably thinking of the Fogo Island Inn, which has been ranked by Forbes magazine as one of the top boutique hotels in the world for the last 10 years. It's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
I'll probably never see the inside of it, but it is a really neat, and the architecture of it is beautiful as well. So it is very well known. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I can imagine. You better bring your spending money. Yes. Any other questions? Let's see. No, I think I've covered everybody's questions. Well, it's been great, Jared. I hope a lot of folks come up to visit you, and it's just another part of the world that I haven't been that far north yet, so that would be pretty cool. It would be very cool to get just to see the landscape and of course all the great birds.
Absolutely, yeah. I hope again, feel free to check this out. Feel free to drop me a line anytime. I'm always happy to answer emails and answer questions. And if you'd like to think about coming up to visit me, I would appreciate it. And if you don't like the idea of coming north, maybe you can go to Trinidad and Tobago with me when it reopens.
Yeah, that's true. One person did ask, are there lodges in the national parks?
Yes, there are. There are various cabins, and one of the national parks has a little golf resort, and there are lots of communities right around the parks as well that have bed and breakfasts and Airbnbs and that as well. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities, places to stay in the parks.
Great. Getting lots of thank yous and great presentations. Fantastic. Thank you. So people enjoyed your talk very much.
Good. Appreciate it.
And we all did. So thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us from all the way up in Newfoundland. And again, hope to see you up there sometime, or as you say, we could go south in the other direction.
Right, yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, folks. Have a great night.
Thank you very much, Jared.
Thank you.
I'll turn it back to Liz.
Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Just one other reminder that it is renewal time for your membership. So please consider renewing your membership for 2022 so we can provide great speakers like Jared tonight, or the speaker next month in December, on December 9th, Paul Bannock will be doing the OWL presentation. So check your email. You should have gotten a renewal email, or you can go on to rochesterbirding.org and renew your membership there. And we hope to see you next month, and maybe even before at Birds and Brews next week. So we will see you soon, hopefully.
Great.
Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Jared, I'll be in touch.
Okay, bye-bye. Have
Okay.
a good night.
Bye,
Bye.
thank you again. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.